Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Zane Schweer. I'm on Team Skillable and kicking us off. Today's session is focused on talking about more effective ways to assess, develop, and validate technical and digital skills across your workforce, customer base, and partners. And why is this critical? Well, it's because the lifespan or half-life of a digital skills relevancy is rapidly shortening. So to drive maximum value from your upskilling initiatives, skills need to be job ready faster. But to do this necessitates a critical shift from traditional skills development. And that shift is moving from completion-based training to learning that is performance-driven, provides evidence-based skills validation, and is hands-on. If you're wondering, Zane, performance-driven, evidence-based skills validation, what do you mean? Don't worry, we're covering what they are and the value that they can bring to your organization today. And you'll also be hearing from Pearson VUE, who has been on this path for over a year. Before we get started, a couple housekeeping items. The session will be recorded and you will receive a copy within a couple days. We love questions, so ask them in the chat. If we don't answer them during the session, we will follow up with you. And if you have any post-event questions, connect with our presenters or you can reply to the follow-up email with your recording. So let's get started. Our presenters today are Danny Abdo, Skillable's Chief Operating Officer, Ashley Neese, Skillable's Challenges Lab Portfolio Manager, and Brian Oakes, Pearson VUE's Director of Product Management. And they'll tell you a little bit more about their background when they present. Again, thank you for your time today. And Danny, I'm passing the mic over to you.
A little bit more about my career. So, I came from, I led learning technology at Bank of America for a number of years. And that's where a lot of this sort of completions versus impact happened. After that, I was at Degreed, where I was really spent a lot of time in the skills world and how can we use skills as a currency. And I would just sort of connect some dots there because as maybe a lot of you are hearing more about skills and things like that, one of the challenges I encountered on skills is tied directly back to this. It was like, okay, this is great. We have all this skills data, but how do I know that people can really apply these skills? Is it based on completions of courses and quizzes? And so, more so now, I think than ever, this question is being asked, on to L&D, and we'll take a look at that in more detail as well. And we'll look at we'll move into what are some solutions? What's available to us today, right? Because I think, even here's one point I'd make. Even regulators, think of compliance training. For decades we used to use completions to prove compliance, and now even regulators are starting to realize, wait, that's not enough, right? So we really are getting forced to lean more into better solutions. And I don't know, I'd be interested, if anybody thinks completions. I don't think anybody would say completions is the perfect way to prove mastery, prove skills. I think it's more of just there haven't really been any good answers to solving that until more recently as technology sort of advanced. And so we'll walk through some of the ways that we're addressing that, solutions. And then we'll hear from Brian. He's gonna talk through what this could look like and what it does look like as Pearson VUE is adopting and leaning more into this concept of performance-based exams and those sort of things. And then we'll have a few minutes. Ashley's going to make this real for us. She's going to show us, some views into what this could look like. So we're going to go through all that stuff here today. And then, starting for just to draw a circle around, what are we specifically solving for? There are a lot of reasons I would say that we need to move from, completion-based to a more evidence-based approach for learning. But a lot of the reasons sort of culminate around this sort of this point in particular, right? The half-life of skills, meaning, I would say when I started in L&D, it was a bit simpler, I would say. A lot of the skills, whether it's accounting or leadership or softer skills or how to do a specific job, we could onboard people, we could train them in those skills, and we were good, for a long time. These days it seems like, a skill you learn today is outdated, in no time. in at the same time, newer skills are showing up all over the place, right? And even myself, I graduated in computer science. I don't, the skills I learned there didn't probably had a shelf life of still, a number of years. Now I would be willing to bet, you learn computer science and it's down to maybe a year or so. And so this, how does this impact L&D? We're sitting here trying to figure out how do we keep up with this shrinking half-life of skills, and then at the same time more and more skills we're responsible for, right? When I was practicing, it was I had my required training, a good catalog of sort of off the shelf training, and I could build these libraries and I would get a long get longevity out of them, and those types of things aren't necessarily true anymore. And some of the reasons, I guess, right, new technology, right, a lot of this comes back to just technology, and digital transformation. We saw this in a huge way when the pandemic hit, as organizations, didn't matter what type of company you were, you had to become a digital company to sort of navigate some of that. Lack of skills and training, because these skills are popping up so quickly. And then antiquated training programs. I think a lot of this too is just point in time learning, and our ability to build programs that can sustain skills and the evolution of skills. And what are the a good example of this is, even if you built training around a technology, now with agile and cloud-based software, I mean, it's changing, month to month to month. And so how do you keep your training programs up to speed with that? All of that stuff is really putting a lot of pressure, right? And I would say to put a pin on it, what this all means, right, is I don't think, I was trying back in the day, I was trying to build sort of business impact studies on the learning programs, because I wanted to prove to the organization that, the stuff that we were working on in L&D was very, very important, and it was having a lot of impact. That's not the reason we need to do it now. Like, we really need to do it because it's mission critical, right? I think, organizations' ability to keep up with this and keep up with the skills gap in the half-life is literally, tied to the survival of the organization. So it's no more we have to prove that we're essential. We have to actually, be essential and figure out ways to keep up and prove that people can apply the skills that they're acquiring. And so, what's at stake is a pretty big deal. And so this is maybe a little bit of, how are we doing, right, with this sort of, based on what's at stake, how are we doing? And, I know on that first quadrant, nobody here, falls within that, 75% of managers are dissatisfied. But, joking aside, I think some of that's just, it's really sort of perception, right? They don't necessarily feel or know that, their teams coming out of these different learning programs are ready, are work ready, if you will, to apply those. And 70% of employees report that they don't have mastery of skills and needed to do their jobs, even though they could pull out a learning transcript and show completions in all of these different places. And I would say 40%, 43% saying this is the skill shortage is a real big problem, and that they're going to feel the impact at a massive level that's hard to even comprehend. And sort of when we talk about internal mobility and things like that, retention, it's it all comes down to these skills. And so I would love people to react to some of this, in chat, if you will. Maybe I'll even ask Brian, just to get the conversation going. It seems, again, like a lot of this is surrounding technology and digital skills. And so, like, take one of these. Like, why do you find that maybe employees don't feel like they have mastery of these skills, these digital skills that they need to do their job? What would you maybe point to? Any comments there?
Yeah, so I mean, you see a lot of traditional learning programs that are very either text, maybe they're video based, and while you can learn a lot from book learning demonstration, until you actually experience it very similar to language immersion, right? When you actually go to a country and immerse yourself in a language versus learning about it in a classroom, it makes a huge difference. So what we've been trying to do at Pearson VUE is, not just embed performance-based testing in our exams, but also make sure we have learning material that helps someone not just learn the material, but also practice it. And with technology changing as fast as it does, your ability to keep static content up to date is really, really low, right? I mean, you can do your best, but to your point, some of these cloud technologies are literally changing, by the month. So having a true playground where you're in the real technology makes a world of difference.
Yeah, great points. So it's the situation, to sort of paint the picture, right? The situation, I think, in the past 10 years, if you're an L&D, is okay. The amount of skills that people need are increasing by the day. They're changing faster, more than ever, and we're being asked to do more with less, right? It's sort of the environment, and how do you sort of adapt and keep up? And so the good news to that, right, is I think while technology sort of advancement and changes have created a lot of these challenges, I would say technology is also giving us, can play a role in solving this, right, and reining this in, and that's what we'll take a closer look at as we move forward. But this was interesting too, because a lot of times we talk about, there's a skills shortage, and all of these different types of things, but like so it's fair to ask, so what? Like, what does that actually mean? And I thought this slide does really good of like tying it to, like, it has detrimental impact, right? You're talking about delays in getting, new products and services out. You're getting, projects not being able to meet their objectives. Think about, I would guess, if I had to guess, right, take the automotive industry, right, reacting to the transformation to EVs. How long it took before you started seeing them release cars to equal sort of Tesla and those types of things. And the ability to adapt and to reskill organizations in these is just so critical, right? And it hits bottom line. It's causing businesses to lose to competitors. I mean, it has revenue, it has real effects. So I thought that really puts it into context. So then you get to sort of, okay, well, what are we missing? And I think going back to what Brian was saying, I think it's such an important point. I love the sort of language sort of comparison there, because it is true. Like, how, I'm not going to learn certain things knowledge-based, learn the knowledge, I've completed it, that's great. I know what to do. Technology doesn't feel like that. It is sort of more like a language. You have to be immersed in it. You have to practice. You need to, it really lends itself to learning by doing, not learning by viewing. And so, what I've, used to see is that we have a lot of learning around these technical skills, but are we actually giving people opportunities to go practice and fail and in these different environments? Because that's where the real sort of mastery and skills happening. So I would sort of tie this back to some of the polls around people not feeling like they have mastery in doing it. It's sort of this shift to this learn by doing. Then you get into the sort of validation, right? You get into the skill validation. Putting somebody through a live environment and a live experience is great, and the practice is great. But again, like, you don't just want to have a completion at the end. The good thing about a live experiential sort of learning type experience is that you can now score and validate people's ability to navigate that and to do it. And so if you've got a real scenario, if you've got a real business scenario that reflects what somebody in a job role is going to have to do with those skills, and you've created an environment for them to go do it, if you're able to now score that environment and they navigate through it, you can start checking those boxes in terms of hey, I can go tell the business leader that, yes, I have 100% confidence as a result of this skill journey, this person's going to be able to perform in that role, right? I think the individual now has a lot more confidence that when when they're being asked to do certain things, they have the skill mastery to go do that because they've had an opportunity to do that job in a safe environment, and they received a bunch of feedback and grading that says they demonstrated that they could apply the skills in that sort of environment. And so that scoring, that real immersion, and then probably last, is the ability to scale, right? So I think, if I was to ask, like, does that sound, like a better way of approaching learning? I think a lot of us would agree, like, yeah, that sounds great, but how can we do this, right? That sounds very, very intensive, high touch. High touch experiences typically don't translate into scalable experiences, but this is where, which we'll show and things like that, I think this is where we can lean into some of this technology that's made our jobs harder, but also can make us solve those problems, because I think selecting approaches that are scalable is going to be key here. Otherwise, I sharing a story at Bank of America, out of all the learning interventions we did one year, I was able to pick 10 of those, which I could do business impact sort of analysis and studies on, because it's just not scalable, historically, to do any of that sort of performance-based analysis, that outcome-based analysis. And so, choosing something that is scalable here becomes really, really important for us. So shifting to an evidence-based, sort of validation type of practice. What does that look like? And so I'll share a bit of sort of how Skillable thinks about this, right? And to summarize sort of what we talked about, we believe it needs to be a hands-on, experience, because that a hands-on experience is the only way that you can score based on performance and outcome, right? And if you're scoring moving beyond knowledge, and so if you can score on performance and outcome, then you can validate. You have evidence to validate, skills. And so if you think historically, right, the past however many years, the only thing we could sort of score at scale are things like activity, knowledge assessments, asking questions, and then more recently inference, right? There's a lot of technologies that are sort of inferring, because you've read this book or passed this quiz, and maybe even looking at work that individual's done, we think that they can do those skills, which are all great. But if I'm thinking about skill validation, on a sort of graph where trying to understand what's highest fidelity, I think the highest fidelity is knowing that they've actually applied those skills on the job. Probably right down from that is they've applied those skills doing the job in a safe but real environment. It's probably second down there. And so that's what we sort of call challenge-centric learning, right? This is a sort of what I call a new methodology for whether you're building high stakes exams, like Brian's going to talk about, or to whether you're just building, I would say experiences within an upskilling journey, or if you're doing, true validation of skill at the end of a skill journey. And it all really, really comes down to, sort of four principles, I would say, is that it should be scenario based, right? You want it to be based on real scenarios that individual is going to encounter in the real world, and make them problems, centric rather than procedure oriented. So meaning, you don't want it to be follow the recipe. You want it to be, hey, I've just given you this problem and this is broken. Can you fix it, right? Or I don't know, if you're a cyber security specialist, we're going to put you into the environment that you're going to be working in, and we're going to attack it as if you're getting a real attack, and you're going to demonstrate that you can apply those skills. And if it's validation, we're not going to give you help, because we're validating that you can do it. But if it's more of a practice experience, if you get stuck or you fail, we'll help you along the way, right? And that really leads into what we mean by learn by doing, right? Instead of, I think there's the traditional sort of model, right, is you sort of start with basic foundation conceptual learning theories, concepts, And you work up this pyramid till you get to this idea of somebody can actually now do the thing and apply the skill and demonstrate it. We'll always need that very, very bottom sort of rung. You've got to have some sort of grounding and foundation and knowledge, absolutely. But I think what we're finding now is you can start the entry point, once they have that foundation, you can move them to the top of the pyramid, start them at the, hey, here's the actual challenge, here's the problem, go figure it out. And if you can't figure it out, we'll see where you get stuck, and then we'll send you back down that pyramid to those places, right? So it really changes sort of the essence of how we can take people through these journeys, these skill journeys, right? And then and that's really the desired difficulties, right? Making it adaptive. So start them at where you want them, right? You want them at the end of this to be able to solve these business challenges and problems, and then adapt it based on the things that they're able to do. So that's more of a challenge-centric approach. And so once you've done that, right, it really is sort of a flip. Instead of starting with, start with, some courses, quizzes, because they've passed some knowledge assessments, they have skills, therefore we infer they have work. Why don't we start a little bit higher up there, especially with somebody that has that foundational experience and where their job is maybe changing or evolving or transforming, build some challenge-centric, sort of learning validation that maps to the work they're going to need to do for the job. Once you do that, right, you now actually open up a lot more use cases as well. It's not just learning, it's internal mobility. Somebody wants to go into a new role, you can start building learning into their career pathing, and maybe if it's an external use case into recruiting. And so this challenge-centric sort of approach to where we're kicking off real evidence that people can apply the skills and do the work, ends up being a bit more universal in nature. And then the last point, before I hand it over to Brian, that I'll say in terms of a framework, in case some people are like, wow, that would sound great, but it sounds like a lot, right? Like we're building, these scenarios and they're all reflecting, and that's what's really neat. And, it is I don't think it has to be. I think the idea is you build, a challenge-centric learning experience, and then you can start modifying and tweaking it and using it as a template. So, if it's for some new capability or new technology, maybe, the person supporting it doesn't need the same, a little bit different experience than the person selling it, or the person building it, needs more, but you're able to now sort of templatize and use these things in different ways. And so there's really a framework that unlocks that scalability. And so that's a bit about, sort of some grounding, and wanted to lay some of that foundation, and later we'll get into more Q&A around this. But would love to hear, Brian, you speak about how have you been leveraging sort of this challenge-centric model, evidence-based, performance outcome-based learning and exam approach.
Yeah, so first, thanks to the whole Skillable team for having me on today. Appreciate it. I've worked with Skillable for a long time in my past life and my current. And from a performance-based testing approach, right? We work with Skillable at Pearson VUE to incorporate the Skillable technology where our clients want to see that in their exams, and the ability to test on knowledge and real performance of skills combined is a great thing. So we make that available on the testing side, but on the learning side, even if an exam doesn't include performance-based testing, it makes so much more sense going through an exam when you've actually experienced the technology, because the questions are not just memorization. They're actually like, yeah, when I did that function, that's how I did it. And it provides a higher level of mastery. So what we've been doing over the last couple of years is creating multimodal learning with a text, video, lab, practice, test approach. So however a individual best learns the technology, they have those pieces, and it may take several different iterations of the same topic to learn them. So what we've seen with the Skillable Challenge Lab product, which we've incorporated into our cert prep offering, is the ability to have a very flexible lab approach. So if a instructor wants to utilize this in classroom, great. If they want to assign as homework, great. If they want to do a little bit of both. So it gives you a flexibility you don't have with a traditional lab product, because you can use it in a self-paced and instructor-led or even a hybrid format, which has worked great for our customers. So they have the ability to use these labs in different ways and to possibly use it as an and solution. So you may go through a instructor-led experience not using any of the curriculum we've designed, and you can assign this as an and solution as a way to provide your potential test takers with not only the knowledge and skills they need, but a confidence booster as well to say, I've looked through, I've seen this concept enough different times that I can feel very confident about actually performing it in the test. So that's kind of my pitch about how we're using Skillable in the Challenge Labs product today.
Great, thanks, Brian. Yeah, no, it's really neat to see. As I have conversations with more traditional L&D organizations, there's sort of this the certification world and exam world. There's sort of an intersecting a little bit now, where I think you're starting to see L&D and organizations want to provide experiences that capstone projects that end with some level of higher sort of stakes certification within their organization. Things that a lot of times they might go and send them external for certain topics. If it's within reach, they can start. You're seeing things like Credly badges and stuff, which I think is another Pearson sort of product that they can bring in and create some of these types of experiences. The tools, I guess, are being made available so they can do that. And then maybe it's prior to sending them out to a formal exam prep, they have those experiences in house, and it's great seeing those two worlds sort of collide and maybe integrate a little bit more tightly.
Yeah, and really, we're just trying to make sure we provide the best tools available, so that you have lots of different options. So you can do everything possible to make those candidates ready and feel confident about the experience. I mean, an exam experience is not necessarily a fun thing to do, right? So we want to give the best possible preparedness tools we can.
That's right. No, that's great. Well, no, great. Thanks for sharing that story. And like I said, we'll circle back to some Q&A, but before we do, let's hand it over to Ashley to add a visual on this, and let's see what this stuff might look like.
Perfect. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is a pleasure to get to show you our Skillable challenges and how we have really applied and taken to heart, again, evidence-based learning. So I just want to give a quick shout out and thanks to Brian again for joining us today, and like I say, offering his insights, how he's used the product and leverage that. And then Danny, you get a shout out too, just for doing the intro and like say, laying the land for me here. So my name is Ashley Neese. I am the Challenge Labs portfolio manager here at Skillable. And today I'm pleased to be taking you through a couple of our Skillable challenges. In fact, I'm just going to take you through one, but kind of show you again how we tie our challenge-centric tenets and learning together, how we tie that into the evidence-based learning, and then actually show you how it works. So before we pop right into the demo, I do want to circle back to the tenets quickly that Danny mentioned. And the reason I want to circle back to, you're going to see some of these applied, if not all of them applied in, like say, the actual challenge we're looking at here. But the first and foremost, you're going to see with our challenge labs, we want our content to be problem-centered and thought-provoking. We know it has to tie to real-world situations, and then also provide feedback, which is one of my favorite features here. But that feedback that can let someone, again, almost comprehend, hey, am I getting this? Or, ooh, I could probably use a little bit more help. Or maybe I need to dig in and study a little bit more on this. We also have mentioned, again, the labs are really problem-centered, and they focus on the end result, right? It's not very much procedure specific. In fact, we just want you to get to the right end result. We don't really care how you get there, so long as you're doing, again, let's say the end result, meeting that goal. We know everybody goes about things differently. So again, not the actual specific steps, but that you're reaching the goal successfully. We also want our learners to figure it out. We know and we encourage that if folks can explore information to achieve a specific goal instead of just being given an answer key, if you will, it really does lead to stickier learning and, quite honestly, even changed and better behaviors. And then finally, our challenges are going to encourage what we call that fail fast, fail forward approach. It is totally okay if somebody makes a mistake, right? We're giving them a safe environment to go back and try again, right? Rinse and repeat. Let's go through fail, figure out how we need to correct it, and then go back and take that corrective action. So in our scalable challenges, we bring those tenets and the evidence-based validation to the forefront of the learning. So again, what are scalable challenges? Wait for it. I'll pull it up here. And hopefully you guys can see my screen now. So our scalable challenges are hands-on learning experiences, right, that result in evidence-based validated skills. Let's go back to one more time. What is evidence-based validation? Okay, layman's terms, it is literally you are trying to prove you're good at something. The evidence-based validation shows you how well you can do it by scoring your completed task, right? Specifically, how our scalable challenge evidence-based, we're going to score a learner's actual performance, and then we're actually going to take that performance and map it to a particular skill or even a larger skill set. And so when you hopefully are seeing here on the screen, and just to give you a little bit of orientation, on the right-hand side, you're actually seeing what we call our instruction pane, and I'm taking us through an Azure challenge today. And on the left is the Azure portal. And again, we'll go through and see that activity, but that is my live lab environment, again, that you're actually going to see my performance in. But notice out of the gate, as we are setting the tone for the challenge itself, we're letting folks know, here's what you're going to be doing. We're giving them just enough constructs to think about, hey, how am I going to implement a service endpoint in Azure? We talked about in those tenets, right? We want learners to figure it out. So you'll notice we actually have hints that can be enabled or not enabled. We want folks to figure it out, right? But we also don't want to frustrate at the same time. So if they need some help, as you scroll down here, you're going to see that we actually have hints along the way. You're also going to notice again, as we kind of say, hey, you need to go create this particular activity, or you need to do this. Notice we are not telling them how to do it, right? We want them to figure it out. Again, I mentioned to you the hints. Danny tied on or hit a quick note on desirable difficulty, right? We have enabled our challenges, like say, so students can feel empowered, and quite honestly, they do have the power to determine how, no pun intended on this, challenging they want the challenge to be. Now, as we go through, again, a few items here, spoiler alert, I have done a little bit of pre-work just so you guys did not have to watch me plunk around in Azure endlessly, because that is just a joyous event for anyone to witness. But I've done a little bit of that, so we don't have to watch all of that. But as you can see, we have check your work sections built throughout our challenges. Remember, we talked about quickly, like in one of our tenets, that we want content to facilitate deep learning. And part of that deep learning is also providing immediate feedback to learners. So again, they know what actions they have got down pat versus what actions they may need a little more work on. So as you can see, and not to brag on myself here, apparently I am most excellent at actually creating a service endpoint in this particular challenge. And again, this is based on actual work that I have done in the Azure portal. And remember, we said that evidence-based is based on a learner's actual performance. So go with me for just a few more seconds, and actually let me do this before I say go with me. You guys doing okay? Any questions, concerns, thumbs up, thumbs down? All right, sweet. Thank you, Danny. So we're on to the next step or the next requirement of the challenge that says, hey, can you now go in and create a network security group? Spoiler again, have done work right ahead of time. But I want you guys to see our scoring engine in place, right? This scoring engine, once I hit the verify, right, it is going out to that learner's actual environment, that learner actually being me, and taking a look to see if I have performed the correct actions. Again, it's not checking to see which pages I may have clicked within the portal or which blade I may have configured something on, but ultimately that I know how to set up a network security group and naming it a specific value, that I also know how to set up a particular rule as well. And again, not to take us deep in the weeds, and I couldn't if I wanted to, into Azure in particular, but you can see a lot of my resources that are already here, the values and so forth, are those same values that we're actually scoring on. And again, those values have to be set by my actual performance. And so just to not, like I say, hone in that I haven't done all the pre-work, but to show you a little bit more in action, I'm now taking you to the last step of the challenge here. And it's asking that I actually create a storage account, right? And so I'm going to go through quickly, hopefully, fingers crossed, nothing like a live demo in action here, but I'm going to create a storage account. And so in the storage account and in the challenge itself, you'll see that it is actually giving me, again, specific values or absolute values that I need to check on and that I actually need to set up, like I say, in the portal itself. And so first and foremost, I need to name that storage account appropriately, which you can see through my value here. And then I need to set up performance, standard, and then the redundancy I actually need to take a peek at here and flip over to locally redundant storage. Once I've got that done, I'm going to go through and create that resource. So again, I'm creating my storage account. You can see that the deployment is in process, and everybody cross your fingers, slight little tap dance that the deployment's going to speed up here pretty quick. And then as we wait for that deployment to take place, notice I'm not skipping ahead right now and moving on to the second steps, right, of where I need to restrict my network access or I need to create another file share. And the reason I want to point that out, so you guys saw me go through and actually create a storage account, but I have not taken, again, any network access or, again, restricted any access. So purposely skip those, but I want you to see our scoring engine in action. Right? So again, it's going out and actually taking a peek, right, of what I've done and what I haven't done. So we talk about that again, evidence-based. It is actually scoring my performance and ultimately mapping it to a particular skill set or task. And so what I'm getting ready to generate now is our end of lab report, and it actually produces to me and shows the areas, again, that I excelled, along with, and I didn't think that window was going to do that, my apologies, and what areas, again, I may need a little work on, right? And so we saw I did not take complete action in my storage account and why I have a little bit of a yellow there. So as we think about that, and you're like, well, that's great, Ashley, what do all these skills really mean? Or, hey, how did Skillable decide that creating a service endpoint is some necessary skill that everybody may or may not need to have? We actually rely on a lot of our challenges, and in particular for a lot of our IT challenges, we actually look to our vendors as North Stars. I shouldn't say our vendors, everyone's vendors in most of this scenario, but in particular Microsoft and Azure. We know based on certain industry certifications, job task analysis, that there are, again, task and skills that everyone must have a mastery of, again, that's related to that skill. So we talked about, in particular, creating service endpoints in Azure. And what I'm showing you right now is actually an exam domain breakdown from Microsoft showing exactly what those endpoints are, again, the endpoints, what skills they relate to, what tasks they relate to, And ultimately, guys, go with me here 1 second as I zhuzh up and hopefully don't make anyone motion sick. Ultimately, what that task relates to as far as a job role, and again, what folks can perform there. So I know that was a fly by night, quickly, high level, but I hope that, like I say, has shown you, again, how we do evidence-based training, again, how we can connect those dots, how we also communicate that information to the learners as well. So let me open it up. I don't know, Danny, and I'll check the chat too. Questions or anything like say you guys want to ask just before I hand it back over. Don't everybody go at once.
Yeah. And yeah, while we wait for maybe people to if they have any questions, what I would say is, Ashley used an example of a very, sort of technical, highly technical thing like Azure, but really what we're trying to convey is the concept and the methodology that's being used here, right? So think about what you could apply it to anything. It might be somebody that's in your finance department, and you're trying to validate that they can read and interpret or build financial reports, which a lot of times are done on Excel. So imagine that challenge, being instead of going through and memorizing knowledge about financial reports, have them go log into a real environment with a real report and have to interpret that and have to answer questions based off of that, or maybe even build one, right? So I just want to not get us stuck on, hey, this is great for super high technical skills, but how about data, digital literacy and analytics, that an organization wants everybody to have some literacy when it comes to digital, and making decisions based off data and those types of things. So it's really a wide, could be any sort of skill there, and then even think beyond leveraging things like the metaverse. We've got use cases where we're have a device, a healthcare device company that wants to validate people know how to do maintenance on their devices. So they're allowing them to virtually do those maintenances versus bringing them in and putting them on a real device and validating that they can do it. And so really just want to emphasize that this is a challenge centric is sort of an approach, to looking at, hey, we've got a skill need. What's the best way? Do we take a knowledge-based approach or a challenge-based approach to solving that? So just wanted to sort of add that. And apparently, I've had enough meetings today where I'm losing my voice. So I'm gonna see if there's any questions here.
Yeah, real quickly, Danny, just to back that up. So what we're using the Challenge Labs product for at Pearson VUE is a wide range of technologies, from people that are really entry level with our IT specialist certifications, new to technology. And the great thing about Challenge Labs is the ability to not only do the advanced scenarios, but also do a little more hand-holding scenarios as well. So it's super flexible in terms of the skill level of the student, and what you need them to be able to do. If it's, learning Python from I'm new to the technology, or it's configuring an advanced cloud environment, it can do everything in between.
Yep. Great.
That's a great point, Brian. And, Danny, thanks for calling out. Obviously, kind of the technical wheelhouse is where, like I say, my comfort level is in demoing, but I think it's so important, again, just to speak to the challenge-centric methodology, right? And it can be applied broadly. And I think to Brian's point, it can also be applied broadly to many different audience levels. Again, whether it's someone newer to someone that actually needs to demonstrate mastery as well. And forgive me, I think Sabrina, you may have popped in a note here, just as far as proficiencies and so forth. There's absolutely, like say, data you can see, whether again, end users, as far as speed in particular, in completing challenges. You can also see proficiency even in score reports, just like say, as they improve, and you can see correct or incorrect answers. I think also is where you can see some proficiency, just as an example.
Yeah, Yeah, and to add on to that, I think where you also get those speed to proficiency gains is if you think about using this approach in the beginning of a skill journey, the sort of pre-assessment, if you will. A lot of times, and I know, when I was in L&D, we would look at an audience and everybody would go through the same experience, and we're going to give, even though this person might have been doing this sort of job for a certain amount of time, and this person was a little bit newer, didn't really know where the gaps were, right? So we would just, everybody, you're going through this whole program end to end, no matter what. With this approach, and we didn't get into like sort of the adaptive kind of features of it and things like that, you can sort of assess up at the beginning by, hey, can you do these things? Now we know what things they can't do, and we can put them down the path and really target those deficiency areas to give them the full proficiency. So it's really really dynamic and adaptive, and from that perspective, which again all gets back to speed to proficiency. And because we have a few minutes, I would say as we sort of look forward, right? This is point in time. We're trying to deal with the skill gaps now, but I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about AI because everybody is these days. But really, if you flash forward, I definitely see a future where our learners are going to have AI co-pilots, as part of their job, right? As part of, and if they need to call up, if they need help or assistance, they can call up the learning they need at any point in time. And I think that's a good thing, right? I sort of call it this learner-led learning approach. So rather than like going to a catalog and searching for a course and taking a 3-hour course, it might be, hey, I would like to learn, let me ask my co-pilot, I'd like to learn this, in a video way, and, this much content, which is great, which allows them to, I would hope, build skills faster and to be more adaptive. Now, this challenge-centric approach, we want to give them that co-pilot because all we care about, back to, Ashley was making the comment, we just care that they can do the work and they have the skills we need to do what the business needs them to do. If they can utilize their co-pilot to learn how to do that and get to those outcomes quicker, that's a win-win for everyone, right? And so this model becomes much more important in a world where knowledge-based learning is sort of getting a bit replaced by AI, and we can focus our attention on the outcomes and the performance we need people to do, right? And that's what a challenge lab really is. So add that plus an AI co-pilot, you start to really see what I think the future of learning can really look like as we move forward. And so yeah, not to get too George Jetsons on us, but just kind of looking forward there into the future. Now I would say a quick, and this would be a question I would even ask, whether it's in the follow-up survey or something like that. We spend a lot of time on sort of the what, the why, and how does this approach look? If there is a desire, I don't know if we have instructional designers and where people are in different parts of the organization, but there's a version of this where you can actually learn, right? Think about traditional, like how you build web-based training today, right? With an authoring tool or an assessment with an assessment engine. That's really what Skillable is providing, right? That's what that's what this is. It's really a newer approach or a different approach you can use where it makes sense to do performance-based learning. And I'll walk you through sort of how that might look like. But if you guys are actually interested in saying like, I would love to learn how to do this, we can spin up another one of these webinars that focuses more on that in the how, which is really cool because there's a bunch of pieces to this, right? There's Ashley's on the team that's continually building what I'll call sort of more generic skill challenges that can be mapped to, all of the trending skills, whether it's AI or analytics or, coding. But think about these also as templates that can be used to modify to your organizations, to put context around the skills your organization needs. The way you might modify them, right, is using Studio, again, think of an authoring tool. And what this also means is you might want to build something completely unique. You could use our Studio platform to build that, whatever the challenge is or scenario. And then, Connect, we didn't go too much into integration and data, which I think is really important as we think about at the end of the lab. Think about all that data that's created. Do you want to package that up and send it over to your HCM or some other system that can really use this validated skills data? We have a connect piece that shows you how to connect this into, whether it's your LMS or your HCM. How do we get that skill data harmonized so it's in the same language that your organization uses around skill data is really, really important. The player is an important piece of this. You probably want to, maybe brand it and make it sort of fit your organization's sort of feel. And then the orchestrator, right? This is sort of the behind the scenes, that power where Ashley was showing you how you can create a scenario and score it. Or when we set up a scenario, how do we put the files where they need to be and create the environment? Maybe we're breaking an environment. Maybe we're doing different things. This orchestrator allows us to do all of that. And then, some optional pieces we have, obviously, our wonderful services team that can either help build these things for you or show you how to do them in the TMS. And so this is sort of a platform. So if it's like, if anybody's out there like, this sounds great, but I have no idea where I would begin or how would I start, like leaning into this sort of more performance-based, skill evidence-based approach, we're more than happy to spend more time on that and show you how sort of the platform comes together to unlock really this really more modern and I think much more business impact way of doing these things. So I'll stop there. I think that sort of brings us to the end. We've got some really good materials and sort of research on these concepts. You guys are more than welcome to grab the QR code and take a look at those if this is something that piqued your interest and you want to dig into further. Otherwise, maybe we'll take a couple seconds here to see if there's any other questions, and then start wrapping up here. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I don't know, Ashley, Brian, any parting thoughts, or if Zane, are you going to bring us home and we'll make this recording available to all of you if you want to share it with any of your colleagues. Hopefully you found it helpful.
Thanks, Dan. Actually, I have a question for Brian. Brian, for when you started this endeavor, like how did you bring the conversations to your organization? How did you determine you know what, we need to move this route? And then how did you start figuring out like who are the team members need a part of this team? And then how did you start to gauge what success looks like?
Yeah, no, great question. I kind of just told them this is what we're doing because I've spent 20 years in the industry and been doing this, so no one really questioned me, which is great. But the great thing about the Scalable Challenge Labs product is it's, when you show it to somebody for the first time, it doesn't take long to get it. Like it's fairly intuitive when they actually see, oh, you mean I'm in a real environment and I can actually break things and then reset and do all these things. So, I would say demo is probably your best tool. And I kind of gauge my success based on the demos I do of our integrated product, right? When I go in front of customers and show this, I typically get fairly good, if not great, feedback on the multimodal approach. They love the ability of kind of seeing different, that we're trying to tackle a skill in different ways based on a learner's aptitude of how they want to digest something. So, if you're doing this for the first time, I would really say do a demo. I mean, if you've got internal stakeholders, show them the product. Don't talk about it because they won't get it. But once you show it to them, they'll figure it out pretty quick.
Awesome, great. All right, thank you, Brian. All right, if there are no other questions, and if there are, of course, ask them in the chat or reply to Danny or Ashley, or reply to the follow-up email that you'll get with your recording. We love answering questions, and we want to help you get to that next level wherever you're trying to achieve. So, Danny, Ashley, and Brian, thank you so much. Our attendees, thank you so much. Again, this webinar was intended to introduce you to what's possible and being able to better assess, develop, and validate skills with performance-driven learning and evidence-based skills validation. So thank you for your time, and we hope you have a great rest of the day or evening.